presidency.
Well, joining me now, Democratic Congressman Garamendi, member of the Armed Services, Transportation and Agriculture Committees, joining me from California, his home state. Welcome, sir. Nice to see you.
Good to be with you this morning.
Let's talk about whether the Democrats have any moves left that could avoid what appears to be an impending budget battle over immigration.
Well, I think really this is going to be in the hands of the Republicans. Has been for the last 4 years. The Republicans clearly dominate the House of Representatives and basically do what they want to do. And what they've wanted to do is austerity and to do nothing on immigration. We now have a Senate coming up that'll be Republican. So they're going to decide how to do this. I hope they think about what is good for this country. We ought not play this budget cliff any longer. It is very, very disruptive to the economy, very disruptive. If you want to solve the immigration problem, for heaven's sakes, don't cut off the money. That doesn't make any sense at all. So we really need to do a comprehensive immigration bill, settle down, let's get this thing done. Everybody knows it's broken. Stop the fussing and fuming and get on with doing what we ought to do, which is to legislate a decent, balanced law.
I think there are a lot of people who are going to agree with you on that, sir. Let's switch gears and talk about the defense secretary, or lack thereof.
Sure.
Is it wise in a time of expanding war to let your secretary of defense go without his immediate replacement standing right there next to him at the podium?
Well, I don't quite understand what this is all about. I do know that Hagel came in with the notion that we would be reducing and moving away from wars. And what really concerns me is that with his departure, are we headed into a new Secretary of Defense that is going to conduct a war for the next decade? We've been at this now for more than 30 years. In Afghanistan, we armed the Mujahideen. We literally created the Taliban to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan, and then they turned against us. We shouldn't have been surprised about that, but then we wound up with bin Laden and Afghanistan for more than a decade, and then Iraq, and here we go again. We need to really rethink all that we have been doing here. It has not worked. 30 years of war hasn't worked. Are we headed for another decade? It appears as though we may be. And this is what concerns me about the departure of Hagel.
Yeah, and probably the top two contenders at that point, Michelle Flournoy and Senator Jack Reed, both pulling their names out of the running, both eminently qualified. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that there's uncertainty. We certainly know that the definition of war, is this nation going to fight a war, is up to Congress. And thus far, Congress has abdicated its fundamental constitutional responsibility. We need a robust debate in Congress and literally across America. Are we going to enter another decade of war? It appears as though we are, without Congress's acquiescence, or just, I guess, standing aside. Maybe that is acquiescence. But we really must debate this. And frankly, we need a different strategy. The strategy of bombing, the strategy of trying to use Hellfire missiles from drones hasn't worked. It's actually inflamed the situation. But we do have ISIL. We have to deal with it. It's not just our war. It's a Middle Eastern war that involves all the neighborhood. If they are not willing to carry the load, then we cannot do it by ourselves. We need to protect ourselves, to be sure. But our strategy has to change. And I want a Secretary of Defense that is willing to look at a different strategy.
All right, Congressman, we're going to switch gears here and talk about what the New York Times is reporting today, which is some new details about the House Republicans' lawsuit against Obamacare. It is focused on the federal government reimbursing insurers for reduced payments. Now, they say the White House needed an appropriation to do that, which it never got. You combine this with the Supreme Court case and GOP dominance on Capitol Hill. So how secure do you see the law really being?
Well, you've got really two different things here. One is Obamacare, which a lot of people don't like, and the second is the Affordable Care Act, which has given everybody in the United States, a very secure health insurance system, one in which there is no pre-existing conditions, one in which your children can stay on your health insurance until they're 26, one in which more than, I think, 10 million Americans now have health insurance, plus another million or several million that are in the Medicaid program. So when you look at it from that perspective, people don't want it to go away. But, oh, no, we don't want Obamacare. Well, I'm afraid that is the Affordable Care Act. So I think the Republicans here are on a very dangerous thin ice if they try to do away with these fundamental reforms that are in the Affordable Care Act. They want to call it Obamacare, which is a negative, but the Affordable Care Act is a positive, so be very careful. The lawsuits, that's always appropriate to challenge the administrative action through the court of law. That's how we've done it forever. That's appropriate. Do I think that they are correct? No. But I'm not surprised they would use a lawsuit. Coming from the House of Representatives, I think is foolish. There are other places where this lawsuit should emanate.
Congressman, quickly here, I know that November is Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and I also know promoting research and funding is a very important cause of yours. You're a co-sponsor of the Hope for Alzheimer's Act. Can you tell me the status of that legislation, and if passed, what it would do immediately?
Well, immediately, it basically has focused the attention of Congress and hopefully the United States and the citizens here. This is a major, major health issue for every family. And certainly for the baby boomers, we're going to see the cost of Alzheimer's going through the roof. It will bust the bank. It is the thing that will create the enormous deficit in the future. And it's also the one major health concern that is underfunded for research. The research on this is less than 1/10 of what we're spending today on cancer and heart disease and HIV/AIDS. All of these things have multiples of research greater than Alzheimer's, yet Alzheimer's is where the major expense is going to be and where every family is going to be affected. So we're just asking right now, as we put together that appropriation that we discussed at the outset of this interview, add another $200 million to the Alzheimer's research. It can be used effectively right now, and we know that the breakthrough on this devastating illness is possible. It's possible. We can do what we've done with HIV/AIDS. We've seen heart disease and cancer deaths all declining as a result of the research that the American public and other countries are spending on research. So let's do that, and that's something we can do in the next 2 weeks.
I'm sure that families who've been affected with Alzheimer's are sending up a cheer for your efforts. Thank you very much, Representative.